Pedimos a todos nuestros participantes que tomen sus asientos para continuar con el foro Nexo Agua-Energía-Alimentos, una visión integral a la sostenibilidad. Por favor, le pedimos al Dr. John Platcott que continúe con la plática.
All right, we're about to begin our second session here. I give everybody a moment to get to their seats. All right, the second part of this discussion that we're going to have this morning is going to be to begin to tie these concepts closer and closer to the Latin American and Caribbean context. What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the three speakers to come up, who will be leading us through this part of the session. Excellent, thank you. We're going to start off with a presentation about the nexus and the environment. And we're going to hear from Fernando Veiga. Fernando is with the Nature Conservancy in the Latin American region. He's the Deputy Director of Conservation. He has experience throughout Latin America in terms of water security and with the water funds that we heard about a little earlier. He has been the Environmental Services Manager at the Atlantic Forest and Central Savannas Conservation Program and the Environmental Services Coordinator at the Atlantic Forest Conservation Program. He's got a Master in Science in the Development in Agriculture, Economic Incentives for Ecosystem Conservation, and a PhD in Social Science with the Development of Agriculture, Economic Incentives for Ecosystem Conservation at the Federal Rural University of Rio de Janeiro. Okay. After Fernando, we'll have a policy overview from Blas Pérez Henríquez. He's the Founding Director, Global Energy, Water and Infrastructure Innovation, and Director of Stanford's USAID Mexico Clean Economy 2050 Global Development Alliance. Blas founded and serves as the Director of the California Global Energy, Water and Innovation Infrastructure Initiative at Stanford University. He is also Faculty Director of the Local Governance Summer Institute and of the Smart City Policy Strategy and Innovation Institute in Stanford. He's a member of the Mexico-United States Entrepreneurship and Innovation Council and is the U.S. co-chair of the MUS-EIC Energy and Sustainability Subcommittee. And then lastly, we'll have Will bring us a practical discussion of what works and what may not be working so well in terms of Nexus solutions. Will is the founder of Water Foundry. He's an internationally recognized thought leader on water strategy and innovation. He's co-authored a book that Greg mentioned and numerous other books. He's presented on the value of water, innovations in digital water technology, the circular economy, and the energy, food, water nexus. He's been a water strategy advisor to private and public sector enterprises, NGOs for his entire career, and has worked with multinational companies across a range of industries in evaluating the technical viability and market potential of innovative water technologies, market entry strategies, and M&A programs. So with that said, we'll begin our presentations for the latter part of this morning with Fernando.
Thank you. It's working, this one? It's working? Thank you very much, John, for the introduction. Bueno, antes de iniciar, yo gustaría inmensamente de agradecer la invitación por estar acá. Es siempre un placer enorme estar aquí en Monterrey con tantos amigos de tantos años trabajando juntos y bueno, en un campus tan lindo también, un día tan bonito. Entonces es un placer muy grande efectivamente estar aquí y poder hablar un poco de que traer un poco la visión del tema de ambiente, o sea, la importancia del environment, del ambiente, de la biodiversidad para toda la discusión Nexus, ¿no? O sea, entonces, inicialmente, esta palabra de agradecimiento en español, bueno, ahí switch to English, ¿no? Por entrar la presentación. Bueno, it's great also to have the last presentation done by Greg, talking about water funds and mention some of the things that we have been doing together here, because I think that's a nice introduction for my presentation as well. So let's start. So the main goal of this presentation is really to try to bring a little bit how the nature can play a role in this whole discussion in terms of nexus, in terms of water, energy, and food, and how will be or how could be or how should be the contributions in terms of nature for this whole discussion. And also, of course, for this agenda that we have been discussing today in terms of the next agenda for the water center and how this nature could play an important role in terms of that, right? So just starting make a little bit, a kind of overview, quick overview in terms of Latin America. So we live in the most biodiverse continent in the world, so it's really, really amazing, the level of biodiversity that we have in our countries. 6 of 10 most biodiverse countries are in Latin America region. Mexico is one of them. I live in another one in Brazil. So, and we have also the other ones, Colombia, Peru, etc. So, and this is really should be seen as a very, very important asset for us. It's really, really an important asset, and we should take care of this asset and also understand, much better how this can contribute to the whole discussion that we're having here. So just to give a sense, so 40% of all species in the world, it's here in Latin America, 40% of the birds, 25% of the mammals. So it's really, really very, very significant. And also, the second largest reef in the world, and the first and the second most diverse tropical rainforest here. So this is, just to give a sense of the importance of this asset and how the importance of also to know how this can play in terms of this connection with water, food, energy. And this is something that I will talk a little bit. So the idea of the presentation is just to give this overall sense in terms of nature, and then make go a little bit in terms of 2 concrete cases that just to stress a bit this connection between what we're talking about here. So, this amazing natural capital. So, as also Greg mentioned a little bit his presentation. So it's really under several threats that we know. So the deforestation rate in the Amazon or in Latin America is the triple of the rest of the world. We still have a very intense rate of deforestation. So this is something a little bit unacceptable at this point, but we still have mostly based in terms of agriculture expansion, soybeans, cattle ranching, especially in this rainforest piece, but also in Cerrado and other places in the continent. Most of our countries still have reasonable deforestation rates. In terms of urbanization, we also live in the most urbanized continent in the world, so this raises a lot of pressures in terms of water, especially around water resources. We have a huge challenge in terms of infrastructure. This, we know that the need of infrastructure that the region has, but on the other hand, we also, and the main challenge associated to that is how can we amplify this infrastructure, but take into consideration very key elements in terms of planning, in terms of how to do this well, how to do this in a better way that we have done so far. So I think this is still a big challenge that we need to face in a different ways. And also, again, this could be a very important topic for here. And then, and also just another example, this overfishing and coastal development as well. So just to, just this overall. But on the other hand, we still have, we should have hope, that actually this is still, we have a lot of opportunity here. So that's the main message here. So we still have, even with changing climate that we're facing, but we can tackle this. We can really, and just a parenthesis here, Tennessee has been working, Tennessee is an institution that was founded in 1951 in the US. Now we work in more than 70 countries. And our main approach that we have been developed for the last years is that nature and people can thrive together. So we really believe that nature and people can thrive together, and this is one of our key challenges of this time. So how can actually we can combine nature and people in a way that really we can move forward. So and then this and what I would like to highlight here is exactly so this Again, I mean, there's examples, no? So even all of these challenges that we face, we start to see some good initiatives. And again, I'm glad to know that, glad to see that Greg mentioned the water funds, because this is exactly, I mean, what I would like also to mention. So these good examples in terms of how can we collaborate, in terms of governments, in terms of private sector, in terms of civil society, in a way that under the collective work, we can tackle this challenge that we face, no? And trying to find solutions for each one of these points, no? For us, no, one of the most successful ones exactly the water funds work that we have developed. No, I mean, is the first case has now appeared in Quito, in Ecuador, in 2000, and then especially since 2011 with this wonderful collaboration, Defense Foundation, IDB, TNC, I mean, and many other partners, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and many other partners. We have been working together in a way that really implementing those solutions for water security, and then energy, and then food, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that we have worked in a very intense way, basically under this concept here, that actually the ecosystem services concept, that actually nature provides services, nature provides solutions and services for the human societies, and nature-based solutions can really help address water security, food, and energy in a very clear way. Talking about enhancing water quality, water flows are here, just examples in terms of water, but and also always bringing this co-benefit approach in some sense. Now we're talking about biodiversity, we're talking about climate resilience, we'll talk all of these things. So, and this is, something that we need to understand more and more how this is work. And this is maybe one of the key challenges that we face. So how, and going back to the previous discussion in terms of data, what kind of data we need to generate to better understand this process? How can, what we can do, how in terms of technical data, in terms of economic data. So this is one of the things that we believe that should be more and more tackled by universities, research centers, in order to understand more and more how this can work. And then now I'll move a little bit to two examples, just to land a bit this concept that we're discussing here. This is an example of one of our funds that we work. Actually, I brought two examples today from Colombia. This is a wonderful example in terms of how can we use this water funds collective approach in order to solve a huge problem in this, but this first case associated to food production. Here, in this area in Colombia, so this is the most important sugarcane production area in Colombia. We're talking about 200,000 hectares, nearly something around 2,750 families working, planting sugarcane, and also organizing and supplying 13 sugar mills in this region close to Cali. This is a very important agriculture region in Colombia. And then in this particular region, around 2006, 2007, the research, they start to understand, all of these things around the water, water issues in terms of water scarcity, this, in some way, this increasing demand for different uses in terms of water. And the research center, which works for the sugarcane sector there, it started to make some predictions in terms of what if, probably water will start to reduce, to be less available for the sugarcane plantations. So in this particular place, so all sugarcane is being done by using irrigation, a little bit different from the case in Brazil, for instance. But in this region, everything is planted using irrigation systems. And they are starting to understand, the possibility of lack of the social license to use this water because the competing use is starting to rise. So then they defined that one of the key goals, and then also at the same time we brought a little bit, under a partnership that we have with the national, with the the partnership that we have with Stanford University, NetCap, the NetCap lab. It's a project that we have in collaboration with Stanford, Minnesota University, and WWF. We have a wonderful partnership around exactly how can we implement modern ecosystem service modeling, and also try to evaluate, what would be the best places in terms of restoring, conserve, etc. We did this work in the Cauca Valley. And was nice to see, it appears, a kind of roadmap in terms of investments, in terms of conservation, restoration, and what we should do to really reduce the water risk that is starting to be more and more, urgent in this area. No? And then combining this use of science, that all of water funds use, and under this collective action, and bringing the sugarcane farmers, the sugarcane mills, and also public institutions of the area, we build now this water fund around these challenges. So how can we, restoring the watersheds, the upper part of the watersheds, we can reduce the risk for sugarcane plantation in this area. Now, this work started in 2010, 2011, and then this is a little bit the results that we have so far. So we have developed around 41,000 hectares in terms of conservation work, different types of conservation work, so many people trained, and we also work with 13 local associations in terms of, people who live in the upper part of the watershed, different types of production pilots, et cetera. And then, based on this work, today have a little bit, almost 10 years now in terms of work on the ground, we are able to start to see results in terms of that. Now, it is really inspired. This monitoring work has been carried on by the same research institution, which provide the first data and make the first analysis in terms of this connection. And now we are starting to see, this a little bit more well distribution in terms of water flow, and also the reduce of sediment. So this is really this is a kind of example, trying to bring us, so how can bringing nature in this equation, in terms of the Nexus equation, we can reduce tensions, we can, start to provide solutions, and also have this broader view and a broader perspective in terms of the solutions that we can find. So this is just one example, really clear, making this link, in terms of how nature can help, in this discussion in terms of Nexus, and one of example, in terms of how can we use this, this pilot in terms of replicate in the other places, is something that we have started to do in other places as well. So, and then moving a little bit, the same approach, the same idea, how can we bring nature to be part of a Nexus problem, and how nature could be, support this discussion. So this is another initiative in Colombia that I think is really, really nice, which is named, the Cloud Forest Blue Energy Initiative, which the idea is to bring the contribution, the potential contribution of cloud forest. Cloud forest is something, for me, it's unbelievable in terms of ecosystem service benefits, because, so that's a little bit, I will tell a little bit why. So in terms of the importance of deforestation in terms of sustainable hydropower, as I think Alberto mentioned this, the importance of water for, the importance of hydropower in our region. So it's really, super important for some countries like Colombia, Brazil, and also here in Mexico as well, in the southern part of the Mexico, is really, really important. And this what happened when we have deforestation in areas of cloud forest. So basically, we have an increase in sedimentation, we have decreased productivity, and profit in terms of if we start to have increased sedimentation, and of course, we start to put energy security at risk. So this is basically the relationship between this, because this is, for me, it's a really important point for this discussion that we're having here. So how we can make this connection in terms of biophysical relations to economic relations, and then, how can actually we start to find solutions, start to understand, how can we, everything associated to externalities, so how can we start to bring and recognize the value of forests, the value of conserve ecosystems, and start to recognize and start to pay for that, and start to bring flows of funds to support the conservation, the reforestation, and the people who take care about this. So, and then in the case, keep moving in terms of, why this is so important. So we have this everything associated to sedimentation when we start to lose forest tropic, forest in the tropics, and also having this going back to the point of climate change. So as we have more and more this less predictable weather patterns, we still, so these start to generate this kind of more unpredictable flows, and then these also, can bring some complication in terms of management of these hydropower operations, And then that's what I would like to say. So what's the benefits of the cloud forest? Basically, cloud forest as this forest that actually not only reduce sedimentation, not only regulate, help to regulate the filtration, etc., but also can capture water from the fog. So this is really amazing because here we have almost a kind of perfect forest in terms of water, because we have all of the systems that we have in terms of filtration, this regulation, but also this water capture, which can be super, super important, because if you don't have this forest there, you just lose the water. You just lose the opportunity to capture water. And this is really, really, more and more important. And that's exactly what this slide is saying. So, we have the sedimentation reduction, so this, of course, reduce costs in terms of turbines, et cetera, et cetera. If we have stream flow regulation, especially when we have these very clear, dry and wet seasons, and we have this in most of our countries, we can keep this flow a little bit more consistent, so this enhances revenue along the year. And then we have these additional water inputs based on this ability to capture water from the fog, and this enhances revenue. So adding all of these things, so we have these increased profits, which is really, really important. And then we apply this concept in a dam in Colombia, in Calima Dam, which this is a collaboration this is a study that we do, this work that we are doing in collaboration with CI, Conservation International, and this is a little bit of the results. So we found out that these in this area, the forest can contribute to something around 7% of annual flows for this hydropower, and this contribution can be 2 times higher in the dry season, which makes this more and more important. And then, so showing that's a really important return of investment in terms of you applying the solution for this particular case in Colombia. And and now we are, based on this work, we are trying to develop a kind of investment, some kind of innovative financial instrument associated to this process. So, but I would not touch on this here because we can have we don't have time to go deeper on that. But but the other thing that we did, and this is just the last slide. So, and then just take this example. And so, what will be the potential of this kind of approach across Latin America region? We published 2 years ago, I think, this book. Beyond the Source. So, how can actually we can extend all the benefits associated to ecosystem, to the water, forest conservation for water, for the many other possibilities in terms of co-benefits, et cetera, et cetera. We did a study, I think it was 2 years ago. And then one of the things that we approached was exactly this potential in terms of using this concept for all areas that we have in terms of degraded lands where we have cloud forests. So what could be the result in terms of that, in terms of potential benefits? So we are talking about almost 60 million hectares, around 60 million hectares of degraded cloud forests in Latin America, overlapping with hydropower watersheds. So this can mean a huge impact if able to restore these areas. And also co-benefits associated to climate, everything associated to mitigation, which is so important, and also the increasing of water resilience, the climate resilience, and socioeconomic benefits and financial benefits as well. So just to have a sense, that's this a kind of thing that should be more and more explored. So this is really, open immense opportunities in terms of economic development, in terms of social development, that should be more and more explored and using this approach. So this is basically what I have, and very glad to discuss more and more this kind of thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando. It's good to start to tie this into the local context and bringing natural capital and the nexus together. Much appreciated. So with that, we'll talk a little bit more about policy in the region. Blas?
Gracias. Bueno, se me va a hacer un poco raro hablar en inglés en mi país. Yo soy mexicano. pero al menos el agradecimiento al TEC, al Centro del Agua, a la Fundación FEMSA y al Banco Interamericano por invitarme a este evento que celebra 10 años y que lanza una nueva etapa en el centro. Bueno, a mí se me encargó hacer I was tasked on doing an assessment on what's been done in terms of policy and institutional development in the region. So what I found is that there's not much specifically focused on Latin America. It's mostly the Inter-American Development Bank. There's a dialogue, the Nexus dialogue, supported by the European Union in many regions, but focusing on this Nexus in Latin America with CEPAL, and some basic research conducted, but mostly, either water, energy, or water and food, and we'll look at some of those interactions. So it's been said already, the region is very wealthy in resources. Unfortunately, some of these resources are accumulated in some areas, and some others are much more at risk of needing water and transport, and so and all of this is going to be exacerbated by climate risk. So one of the things that I found in the review is that so far there's not much consideration of the Nexus or Nexus thinking and policy planning in how we actually regulate or manage the resources. There's some exceptions right now in Argentina, Colombia, and Uruguay. Argentina is starting to work in the Bermejo Basin with this perspective. I was told by our colleagues from the Inter-American Development Bank that Uruguay is creating a Nexus agency, and Colombia is starting to introduce this also for basin management. And so when you don't have an integrated planning and holistic view, you're not collecting the right data right now. So there is a lot of data, but there's not, or it's not organized in the way we need it to actually do policy making. And when with climate change, things are not going to change that much on average for the region. However, there is going to be very localized effects, and that will require very deep knowledge on the local Nexus dynamics. Another thing that's been said already, the region is produces a lot of energy through hydro, but climate change is going to affect that. And the availability of water, well, the south will have much more water, the north will have much less. And Mexico is going to be the biggest taker of the whole region because it's highly at risk from climate change effects. So far, all the policy and regulations are highly disconnected and fragmented, and there's a misalignment right now with the national climate policy in the region and what we would think of balancing the nexus, the water, energy, food nexus. And so there is a need for institutional strengthening for the nexus planning and policy making, and this is it. This is what I'm going to say through all these other slides that I will be talking about. So one of the things that it's been, this is part of this nexus dialogue, is that we have to think as water as a decisive element of the nexus. And what we would have to start thinking on institutional development, institutional innovation, and policy innovation, thinking about how we're going to manage that from the public sector and interacting with all the different stakeholders. We need to strengthen, therefore, all the water agencies, but with this view of having to interact with other entities within the nexus. And one of the recommendations was that you got to keep these agencies, the agencies that are going to look at the management of the resources, as neutral and focusing on balancing the nexus and letting the other ones, the infrastructure and the ones who approve the projects, be separate. Why? Because you want to have some level of neutrality and not allow politicians to go for, I'm going to dig my big dam and then I'm going to cut the ribbon, or let companies say, oh no, we should promote this type of activity because that's going to give the biggest bang for the buck or investment. So that was one of the biggest recommendations. And one thing that has been done is to identify, again, at a very high level, we don't have all that data, but sort of the interactions in the region. So this work is already being conducted, and this is a great opportunity for the Center for Latin America and the Caribbean to start doing research on the very specifics of all of these interactions. And one of those is, you have counterintuitive results. As you introduce clean tech, or for instance, biofuels in the region, or biomass is a big driver for climate change, but that's going to require much more modern irrigation, and you're going to try to increase your yields and all that kind of stuff, and that's going to demand more water, and it's going to compete for production of food. So there are all these complex interactions that we need to get into much more deeper analysis. The Inter-American Development Bank, they did an analysis focusing on what you were mentioning. Basically, they divided the region in all these sub-regions, and in an integrated assessment, they priced the different elements of the nexus. However, they added the carbon price, and that brings a very different view of how the interactions at the nexus happen. And as I was saying, there's all these temporal variations on water availability that climate is going to bring, and this just happened in the desert in Chile recently. You're going to have much more intense, damaging, and costly climate impacts, and you have to plan for that. The analysis tried to balance this, the perspective of the nexus with what the countries in the region have already committed under the Paris Agreement, which is basically their climate ambition, and they are taking all these measures. But unless you look at it from this perspective, you don't really know what the effects are going to be. So as I was mentioning, biofuels, if you're planning to use biofuels as your energy transition policy, it will have an impact at the WEF. And so what we need is this policy integration and alignment with this resource thinking and balancing these climate policy objectives and with the rational use of resources at the nexus. I was mentioning that it is very important to start looking at these local dynamics, how the change. This is already a mid-century analysis of how there's going to be variations in the availability of water, and it's going to be impacting different areas. So I already mentioned biofuel, biomass as an area that will be demanding or stressing other resources. The idea of, for instance, and Nature Conservancy promotes the idea of afforestation and create carbon sinks and all that kind of stuff. But that will require also water and conservation, and so all these things have to start being balanced within this nexus thinking. And then the other thing is, for a resource-efficient economy, if you want to be resource-efficient, you really need to price things right, and water is not priced correctly, and you're going to have to build infrastructure. And so we need to start looking at what are going to be those investment needs to move water to places that will not have water. This is part of their analysis. This is just to show that this is without having an implementation of their climate action plans. But as you can see, there's going to be changes, and you can see Mexico being one of the biggest water takers as the climate changes, but also as Mexico implements its climate action plan. Irrigation, I mentioned already, is going to be the biggest, which is going to show the biggest growth, mostly because of these effects as they model these different elements, taking into account the carbon pricing. And these are very complex interactions. So one of the biggest conclusions from all the different groups that are looking at this is that we need to create public policy with this view. And it has to be very inclusive. We have to include everybody in society. Multi-stakeholder consultation processes with very localized and cross-reference information, multi-scale and temporal planning. We need, I was already mentioned that, you know, pricing is very important, so economic instruments are going to be key. The realignment of subsidies and taxes is necessary, while at the same time incentivizing public and private investment towards the nexus. And, you know, everybody has to understand the interplay of all these things in this context. And then again, the intersectoral public policy making is going to be key, interagency cooperation and intersectoral collaboration. We already talked at the beginning, breaking silos. That's difficult. You're talking about cultural organization, water agencies, think only water, energy agency, having them to talk together and plan. And there's other dynamics in the public sector, is turf wars, you know, who controls the budget, who's going to do, all that's going to come into play. And that's difficult. And on top of that, you're going to bring the communities, and then you're going to bring the business interest. And that's very difficult, but it is possible. It is possible. It's just new frameworks to have you do this type of process. At the end, what we want is food security, water security, energy security. You achieve that through the balancing of the nexus. However, the region has different dynamics. The economies of Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina themselves are going to demand most of the resources for the whole region. Just because wealthier societies, they're going to demand more products, more food, all that kind of stuff, and that has to be taken into account. And so beyond the physical considerations, again, it's going to be politics and economics that are going to determine the allocation availability of the resources at the WEF. And we already talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but this is one of the most unequal regions in the world. Income distribution is not balanced, that there's a lot. We need to include those marginalized communities into the discussion, and we need to try to be more equitable on the decisions. And finally, if we can achieve these, we can actually move forward the human development goals. And I was just going to mention, I've been doing this type of analysis where I live now in California. It has similar situations where, you know, all the water is in the north. There's a lot of dry areas in the south. We've got to move a lot of water in the region. And I was asked by this group that created this handbook for resource nexus, which includes land. Somebody mentioned that land had to be included, and other materials, extractive industries, oil, gas, and mining. They use a lot of water. They need to be considered. But anyway, the focus was not only on finding technological innovations, but also institutional and policy innovations. You need to think about that. And also, this group talked about linking more the WEF thinking and the Nexus thinking with the Sustainable Development Goals. And now we're in Mexico, just to bring it to back to all this idea of, you know, a social vision, thinking, technology thinking. But the Mexican government is coming with a very social perspective, helping communities. They're creating these new programs, Sembrando Vida. And maybe it is an opportunity for institutions like the center to try to help them. It is intersectoral. It has the Ministry of Agriculture, SEDATU is land use, and the Ministry of the Environment, Labor. They're trying to focus on the South. It's limited in their investment, but it is bringing all these players and these different stakeholders into account. And maybe that there's a role for those who are thinking that these have to be the type of framework that we need to use to better balance our resources, to actually work with governments that are launching this type of initiatives in Latin America. And with that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Blas. I mean, it sounds like we have many, many policy barriers, but to me it also sounds like there's many opportunities here for the center to understand, research, and facilitate these connections that we know just are necessary. Well, with that said, we'll have our last speaker come up next. Will, tell us a little bit about what's working and what's not working within the context here in Latin America.
Thanks. I feel like I need to spend the next 20 minutes responding to Greg's comments, but I won't do that. I'll do that over cocktails. But I do want to make a couple of points about innovation. One is that I'm an optimist, so be forewarned that you will actually hear a positive story here. And while I agree it's the greatest challenge of this century, it is the greatest opportunity for innovation for all of us, regardless of what you do. So that's my message here, and that's my ask, essentially. When you leave, think about innovation with respect to the nexus. And the second point, this does go to Greg's comment, or crack, I actually have a broader view of innovation than technology. I mean, I love technology just like everybody else and fall in love with it. But I think the excitement in Nexus solutions is really not about technology. It's about partnerships. It's about new business models. It's even public policy. And that's not a world that I live in. So when we think about innovation, think about it very broadly. And there was a question earlier about, I've got a great technology, and how do I get investors to put in some money in this and help me scale it? Investors might get excited about technology, but they really invest in people. So when you're thinking about your business, think about a business model and think about your team, because then people get really excited about it and they're prepared to go in with you and help you scale it. You're not going to do it alone. So my 2 cents there. So why water? I'm a water guy. I sort of sit in that silo. And I think there was some agreement that this is the big lever. And why water? I have a lot of conversations with businesses trying to convince them that water, regardless of what they do, is critical for their business. So why water? These projections are rather grim, okay? We can't do anything without water. The assumptions, though, are tied to business as usual. So again, innovation should be about business as unusual. What are we going to do differently so we don't have to grapple with these stress levels or stress issues? Innovation stakeholders. So I'm not going to start with technology. I'm going to talk about people and stakeholder groups. And this is a graphic from a friend of mine who started a program actually based in Denver, Colorado, called 10-10-10. It's 10 wicked problems, 10 entrepreneurs for 10 days. And water is a wicked problem. The nexus is a wicked problem, which means that it's complex and it can't be solved by any one stakeholder. So what's unique about this program is that the program goes out and asks businesses, the public sector, NGOs, what's your biggest challenge with respect to water? What is your biggest challenge with respect to the nexus? As opposed to, we're going to go fund a bunch of startups and hope for the best. So they ask people that are trying to solve complex issues like water or the nexus. They bring in 10 entrepreneurs that know nothing about the topic, okay? Because obviously, as practitioners, we're not getting it done. So we need people outside the sector to come in with a blank sheet of paper and think about, wow, I can take what I know and apply it differently. And for 10 days, and after the 10 days, they spin out companies. And it's really, really interesting to watch because there are some really unexpected solutions. The key point here is that all stakeholders have a role to play in innovation. And we typically think about the entrepreneur. We think about the VC. Well, they're one piece of the puzzle. So in the upper left, entrepreneurs are great. They're really fast. They pivot constantly, but they have no scale, which goes back to that earlier question. Great idea. How do I scale it? Public sector, they're great at scale. Once they decide, and there's a regulation in place, things change. They move incredibly slowly. That's tough. And then multinationals, and I would argue NGOs probably sit somewhere in here, depending on who you are, fit in the middle. So multinational has the ability to move pretty quickly and provide resources, maybe not as quickly as entrepreneurs though, which is why they sometimes outsource their innovation and venture. So when you think about innovation, think about the ecosystem. Who has to play to solve these complex problems? Energy, water, food nexus, stress. Again, I can't say it enough, great opportunity for innovation. A few examples of what works, so you can have Nexus prizes. So imagine H2O is the Water Tech Accelerator in San Francisco, and occasionally they will run a Nexus prize to drive innovation in not just technology, but business models, joint incentives. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but PG&E partnered with water utilities on rebate programs, so conserving water, conserving energy. Cross-industry, we don't see enough of that. We tend to look at innovation in silos. So this is an example of EDF in France partnering with the ag sector to ensure that there's enough water for hydropower and agriculture. Water funds, very excited about funds. I encourage everyone to think about funds, not necessarily water, so energy, food, water funds. So AB InBev, Nature Conservancy, Latin American Water Funds, great example of how to bring diverse stakeholders together to solve complex problems within a watershed. One of my favorite quotes is from a science fiction writer that invented cyberpunk. What I like about this is that it's true, right? It's the future has arrived. It's just not evenly distributed yet. So you really can see innovation alive and well, and I would argue water funds are a great example of innovation that is not evenly distributed. So Latin America, great. US, not so much. So William Gibson, I think, nailed it very early on in the 80s. I will talk about technology because I think it's really cool. So this Nexus e-water company came out of Imagine H2O, a Nexus prize competition, and they looked at energy and water at a residential scale and recycling water. Very cool example of Nexus innovation. New sources and localized treatment. I had a conversation yesterday about the ability to leapfrog. There's no reason we need to be building last century infrastructure. We now have technology and innovation about funding and financing and business models to think about off-grid solutions as part of the mix. We now have the ability to think about decentralized and distributed systems. And here are just a couple of examples of companies that are focused in this broader trend. Digital, I am absolutely convinced that digital technologies will transform the water sector. And it is not just about more data, it's about actionable information and democratizing that information so we can make better public policy decisions and better personal decisions. And the World Economic Forum published this, or they have an initiative around the fourth industrial revolution, essentially how digital technologies will transform everything. There's a paper that's focused on water, and I think it's really exciting. It really can address many of the Nexus issues through digital solutions. And then financial, Climate Bonds Initiative has a bond initiative focused on climate and water. And of course, the funds, I think, are really interesting and incredibly powerful for what they can do in terms of bringing people together. And that was a bad joke, by the way, so hope no one owns stock in it. So circular economy and decoupling, so think about economic development and business growth decoupled from resource use, so we don't have to keep using resources the same old way under business as usual. We can really drive efficiency, reuse, and recycling while having growth. Circular economy, I think there are a number of examples out there of how to think about how we use resources and dispose of them and just reuse them and recycle them over and over again. And then I'm a huge fan of prize competitions because there's nothing like monetary incentives to get people motivated. And I was fortunate to work on the X Prize for water a couple of years ago. So thinking about how do we ensure that there's not another Flint? That was the big driver. And where we landed was decentralized water treatment coupled with real-time water quality data. So people would know what they were drinking out of their tap. What a radical notion. And that's been taken further by Imagine H2O and a couple of investors, and they ran an urban water prize. And these are 3 of the winners. And while their technologies are interesting, they have really innovative business models with the goal of scaling their solutions. Innovative partnerships, I actually get very excited about unusual partnerships. We're only going to get this done if different people come together and decide, you know, we actually have a common goal here to drive economic development, business growth, and social well-being, and preserve natural capital. So Ngo and Tech Accelerator, this is one of my favorites. The Nature Conservancy partnered with Techstars, and they have this partnership based in Denver, and it's focused on sustainability solutions. And they've got a couple of companies that went through the first cohort that are focused on watershed issues. Really, really exciting to think about a tech startup teaming with an NGO. That's radical. And then AB InBev and ZX Ventures. So AB InBev, we know who they are. ZX Ventures is their venture fund that they started to drive innovation. So they have a partnership between the two, and they had a little over 20 companies, and in that cohort, they identified companies that were certainly innovating with respect to agriculture and packaging and so on, but also water. So here's a multinational that's betting on innovation to ensure that they have a supply chain, but also that they can solve environmental and social problems going forward. And then Nexus Innovation, Innovation in Public Policy. I am not an expert in public policy. I tend to focus more on the business side, but I think this is pretty much it. We need radical changes in public policy and getting people out of silos. Huge fan of market-based solutions. If people are making money, then you're going to scale solutions. You'll get their attention. Latin America, what's working and not working. I will surprise people because technology is not on this list here. What doesn't work, siloed approaches. We tend to sit in our silo and really not think about food or energy or social issues and so on. I mean, I introduced myself as a water guy, so even I do that. Perceived abundance, this is one of my favorites. We really don't accept the fact that water is a finite resource. We're not making any more. So that sharpens the mind. If I only have a gallon or a liter of water to run my business or to grow my economy, I have a different way of viewing it. I price it differently. I drive efficiency. Business as usual, I talked about that earlier. Linear business models, this is absolutely fatal. You know, what worked last century is not working now and won't work going forward. Centralized utilities. Centralized utilities have delivered safe drinking water for a very long time, and they're pretty good, except when they don't. So I want us to think about the other menu options that we have, like distributed, off-grid, decentralized solutions. We have the technology. There's really no magic here. So not looking to replace centralized utilities, but we have other choices. What works? Collective action, or former colleagues would refer to it as aligned action. It's great people get together in a room and say they're going to work together, but unless they're aligned, nothing happens. It's a great conference, it's a great get-together, but stuff doesn't get done. Collaborative approaches, the soft side of all this, is absolutely critical. Policy lens through viewing scarcity, essentially, recognizing that we have finite resources in a finite period of time to solve some of these big challenges. I think it is absolutely essential to get embedded into business thinking and public policy. Decentralized and green infrastructure, absolutely critical. So what's working? 3 examples. that have nothing to do really with technology. The first is really Mexico's National Water Reserve Program, acknowledging that we need to manage water resources in a sustainable manner. California has finally started to address this issue through their Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, but really thinking about extraction rates and ensuring that there's enough groundwater over the long haul. And then green infrastructure in Brazil, and then also in Mexico City. Again, I would encourage you to think about these as funds very broadly. They're certainly focused on water, but there's an opportunity here to think about power production. In a water-scarce watershed, would you opt for renewables, low water use, power production? And think about agriculture with respect to water and energy. So I think that the really good news and the exciting part here is less about the technology, doesn't lead with the technology. It's really about innovation in funding, financing, and partnerships, which is really, I believe, why we're here. So thank you. One last quote, of course. Innovation drives economic development and business growth and social well-being. And we need to do more of it, not the same way we did it last century, but really bringing in a broader group of stakeholders that have a different view on what these challenges look like and solutions. So, thank you.
I'm going to use that phrase again. Business unusual. I like that. That's a very good phrase. We've had some great presentations this morning. This second group, we're going to have a question and answer session, just like we did in the beginning. We are going to do one thing differently, though. Since we do have the translation service, and some of us have these, because they have a hard time understanding, you can ask your question in English or Spanish. Feel free to do either way. We'll be able to facilitate it. We've got some great translation services in the back. Who wants to start us off on our panel this afternoon, or this late morning, where we've heard about policy, we've heard about technical issues, and we've heard about innovation? Do we have any questions to start? We have one right here.
Gracias a todos, antes que nada. Esta pregunta es para Blas, por eso la estoy haciendo en español. Hablaste de las regulaciones de los precios y de la necesidad de aumentar los precios y darles un valor acorde con lo que representa el servicio ecosistémico. Eso representa al mismo tiempo, me parece, un vacío legal, ya que todas las personas tienen derecho al acceso al agua. Entonces viene el conflicto de cuánto puedes regular y qué puedes regular. Supongamos que la regulación no vaya hacia el uso doméstico, sino solamente al uso industrial. Eso impactaría el crecimiento económico, porque el crecimiento económico es posible gracias a que el agua es barata. ¿Cómo se manejaría esta política o qué implicaciones podría tener o cómo podría imaginarse ese futuro?
Bueno, este es un dilema que se ha manejado en muchos contextos institucionales. Se ha tratado de experimentar con los mercados del agua, ¿verdad? Asignar derechos de propiedad y hacer un balance, y que los que puedan ser mucho más eficientes puedan vender sus excedentes, que se hagan bancos de agua, haya un intercambio. O sea, teóricamente hay soluciones. El problema en política pública siempre es la implementación y el balancear los intereses, y a veces los grupos de lobbying están mucho mejor, algunos grupos están mejor organizados e influyen en la política, pero también hay una parte de equidad o de política, de visión del gobierno, de que hay que dar acceso libre al agua. Entonces es un problema delicado, pero eso no significa, si queremos que la gente piense de recursos escasos, tienes que crear esa escasez poniéndole un precio. Entonces, es un reto de política pública, ¿no? De poder ponerle el precio correcto a los recursos para hacer un balance. Es un reto.
¿Puedo hacer un...
Fernando,
Sí. ¿Funciona acá? Sí. No, solo un comentario adicional a eso, ¿no? Will mencionó uno de los puntos positivos acá, exactamente la ley de saneamiento en Perú, ¿no? Y es un tema que trabajamos bastante también en eso, y es hoy, ¿no? Y hablando un poquito de fondos de agua de una manera general, es hoy una de las políticas públicas que más estamos buscando, o sea, exactamente cómo internalizamos el costo de la conservación de las cuencas en precio del agua, ¿no? Porque hasta la gran mayoría de nuestra agua, ¿no? Vendida en el continente, estamos hablando, ¿no? De captación, tratamiento, distribución, pero efectivamente no consideramos la cuenca, ¿no? Y esto, de alguna manera, no genera incentivos positivos para aquellos que están protegiendo la cuenca, ¿no? Y lo que estamos viendo es absolutamente fundamental para generar recursos para la conservación de la cuenca y para aquellos que están ahí. Y al final del día, ¿no? Generando resultados mucho más positivos para todo el sistema, ¿no? Entonces, un poco, o sea, cómo utilizar un poco, ¿no? Esta lógica de precios y, ¿no? tarifas para avanzar. Para nosotros hoy, esa es una eje central del trabajo de conservación de cuencas, exactamente traer y dejar más claro, ¿no? el valor que se tiene ahí a través de los precios, ¿no?
Thank you, Fernando. Will?
Thanks for asking that question. A couple of points I'd like to make. We do need to price water according to value, and we need to ensure that everyone has universal access to safe drinking water. So the human right to water is real, and we can't price people out of the market. That's not going to happen. I would ask us all to think about who should pay for innovation in the water sector, for example. And it may not be who we expect. So would a food and beverage company or consumer product goods company actually pay for technology innovation in their supply chain? Very different than sharing best practices, but actually making investments, perhaps through a fund that taps into other industry sectors because it benefits everybody. So I don't think it's a simple answer in terms of, well, we need to price according to value, therefore people can't afford it. It's, let's think differently about who needs to start paying for that service.
It's an excellent point. Now we have the social dimension added to the nexus, so it's a very critical point. Great. Another question, please.
Yes. I wanted to point out two issues, very important. I didn't have the chance during the morning session, but I think there are two very important elements that we need to consider. We have already talked during the morning about technology, right now innovation, policy, etc. But I think we are forgetting one important element, that is the human nexus. Okay? And I also would like to point in the table during this discussion or the coming discussions, because when we think about water, energy, and food, always we are thinking to satisfy or to meet one necessity or one life of humans, okay? But if we don't consider this, the behavior, attitudes of humans, we can understand why some people like to use 1,000 liters per day, or 10,000 liters per day, or 100 liters per person per day. So these differences are very important to consider. And if we don't integrate these elements in the nexus, so we really will not achieve a comprehensive and holistic vision of the sustainability. This is one element. The other element is that we need to include in analysis also the value chain of the water, value chain of energy, value chain of the food production. For instance, in terms of water, when we don't consider these elements, how we look for improve the water usage in agriculture if the farmers doesn't receive the real value of the harvest, and how they can improve technology because they don't receive exactly the how can I say, the really amounts of money that they need or the sea. Okay? So normally occur a mismatch between the value that we assign to the water, energy, or foods, depending on the water users, the policymakers, the professionals, the authorities. So this mismatch creates really a huge problem that we cannot solve the problems in Latin America, around the world, during this century or before this century. With, for instance, in the case of water supply and sanitation, we have not achieved the universal coverage because of this kind of issues. So that's why I think these two elements are very important to consider in the discussions. Thank you.
Will?
Real quick on that, I'm glad you brought up humanity and our role in, or role in not driving towards solutions, but I think a key part of that is how we talk about these issues. And I live in Denver, we're talking about the Colorado River Basin and referring to scarcity as a drought. And as long as we keep calling it a drought, hope becomes a strategy. Everyone is going to wait for it to rain next week, next year, whatever it may be. And the reality is that the basin is over-allocated, and we have lousy practices in terms of how we manage water. So, you know, I'd say that if we can crack the problem of us, we'll get much further along. And you talked about value chain. I absolutely agree that we need a broader view of what a value chain looks like. And even for utilities, you know, utilities typically don't look upstream. Well, now they're starting to think about their entire value stream, which is the watershed, their operation, and consumers and customers. You know, not unlike the way a food company would think about their value chain, you know, ag operations and consumers. So I think you make really two critical points in terms of how are we going to solve this.
Okay. Other question? Right here.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Luis Treviño, buenos días. Yo tengo un comentario acerca de la parte del derecho de agua. Es como el derecho al sol, o sea, todos necesitamos del sol. Y creo que hay un elemento importante que hay que introducir que se llama reconocer el esfuerzo que cada uno de nosotros puede contribuir, el recognition o reward. Y eso puede ser a nivel domicilio o puede ser a nivel pequeña empresa o gran empresa, inclusive en la parte agropecuaria. Entonces, me gustó mucho el comentario acerca de los mecanismos de mercado que mencionaste, Bill. Creo que pues, hay que explorarlos más. Y hay que encontrar una forma sencilla, práctica, de reconocer el esfuerzo que cada uno de nosotros podemos aportar. Por ejemplo, si uno pone ya sus paneles solares en su casa, ya la Comisión Federal de Electricidad reconoce la energía que uno puede aportar a la red, ¿verdad? Antes no sucedía. Entonces, ¿de qué manera, y a lo mejor es tecnología y a lo mejor son medidores, de qué manera podemos reconocer el esfuerzo que la industria hace para purificar el agua? Muchas veces el agua que la industria utiliza está en mejores condiciones la parte de residuo que la parte como la absorbió de la tierra o la absorbió de la red. Entonces, creo que a través de medir y reconocer el esfuerzo que cada uno de nosotros podemos contribuir, le vamos a dar al valor real del agua. Realmente el valor real del agua pues es muy difícil de cuantificar. No es lo mismo hablar del suministro a un hogar que consume 100 litros diarios que otra empresa o un agricultor que consume miles de litros, ¿no? Entonces esa es mi observación. Creo que valdría la pena también hablar un poco en la parte de política y creo que definitivamente no esperemos que la parte de gobierno lo resuelva o la parte privada lo resuelva, sino que va a tener que ser algo en conjunto. Gracias.
Blas, please.
Hablando de un punto de ponerle precio a los recursos y hay el Nexo Agua-Energía, México está a punto de lanzar un piloto sobre el mercado de carbono. El mercado de carbono va a mandar una señal a la economía mexicana de que hay que ser mucho más cuidadosos con el llenar la atmósfera, pero eso va a tener un impacto en la energía. En California hay un sistema a nivel de la economía total que está mandando esa señal, hay que ser mucho más recurso eficiente. Y bueno, este tipo de incentivos de gestión de la demanda, ¿no? El aspecto de comportamiento, mandando señales de mercado, dando incentivos, rebates, ¿no? O sea, todo eso es muy importante, pero eso requiere de un reacomodo y una realineación de las políticas, de la regulación, y apenas está en México permeando, ¿no? Una reforma energética, un mercado de carbono ante una nueva administración que trae una visión bien diferente. Entonces, las elecciones tienen consecuencias, va a haber la industria tiene que informar, ¿no? Del interés de invertir en estas cosas y de que si hay estas condiciones. Ahorita en México en particular tiene una situación interesante, pero como lo vimos, el Banco Interamericano está analizando cómo estos precios van a afectar en las diferentes políticas. Es decir, hay en la parte humana, ¿no? El comportamiento, los incentivos funcionan y por eso se está innovando en política pública al introducir mercados, pero son cosas nuevas que van a tardar en permear, pero si estamos hablando de una colaboración en este proceso, los diferentes voces que habría tienen que también informar el proceso de política pública y también los institutos de investigación, haciendo lo que decimos, yo hice mi doctorado en políticas públicas, ¿no? El conocimiento utilizable, ¿no? Ponerlo de una forma que lo entiendan los diferentes jugadores y los reguladores puedan adaptarlo. En México en particular es un reto porque ahí están los instrumentos de política, pero se están reevaluando ante una nueva administración.
Thank you. We probably have time for one more question.
I won't take credit for this question because it came from one of my students that's listening to you from the UK. And she said that it's nice to focus on these three things, but she's right. We should also somewhere put in the center the waste, because whatever activity, whatever you call it, waste or product, whatever you call it, whatever activity, we're still not 100% efficient. And as I mentioned in my presentation, right now there will be no shortage of food anywhere in the world if we didn't waste. So don't take away the eyeball from the waste. I think that's a key point.
Who would care to comment on that? Will?
I absolutely agree that waste is a big part of it. For me, it goes back to, with respect to water, if you think supply vastly exceeds demand, you're going to be wasteful. Well, that's not really the case. So you're generating, inefficiencies in the system. It's the same for food and, power production, land use and so on. So yeah, waste is certainly part of it. Land needs to be part of the discussion also, and social and natural capital. So it's not just the three that are part of the nexus. It's really interconnected with a number of other critical issues for humanity.
Please, Fernando.
Quick comment and confirmation on that. I think that going back to a point that Will mentioned, I think for me it's really critical now, and we could see this in Brazil some years ago when we had the first big drought problem in São Paulo 4 years ago, 5 years ago, which the country, which most of the people assume that it's abundant in many different ways, really start to perceive the scarcity thing. So this perception that we need to start to think about this. And really, because as you said, when you think in terms of all the deforestation process that is still happening. So this is a super waste of it really don't make any sense, and it still keep deforesting when you have all the technology to make much better in where the places that we have already cleared. So I think that this applies for many different aspects, and should be one of the center pieces of this whole discussion.
Blas, I'll give you the final word.
Hablando del humano, los aspectos psicológicos, el problema del agua también a veces es de percepción. En California ha habido sequías, hubo una super tormenta y la gente psicológicamente cree ya hay agua otra vez abundante, pero la agua del subsuelo que no vemos y que no percibimos, pues ese ha sido un problema. Y hablando del desperdicio, con la perspectiva económica, yo sé que esto tiene que venir desde una perspectiva interdisciplinaria, pero el desperdicio, al tú ponerle precios y al forzar a la gente que sea más... Economía es economizar, ¿no? Y yo doy clases de mercados de carbono y todo eso, y siempre les recuerdo a los estudiantes que hay una segunda parte en la receta económica, ¿no? Una es balancear la conservación ambiental con el desarrollo económico, pero se olvida que al hacer más escaso un recurso, estás haciéndole un llamado a que el comportamiento sea más innovador para poder crear eficiencias y crear nuevas soluciones tanto de gestión como tecnológicas para poder maximizar el recurso y balancear más. Pero bueno.
Thank you very much. Well, this concludes our speaker session. We're not quite done yet. We have Alberto to come and close us out. But join me in thanking these gentlemen here and offering some great insights. Thank you very much. Alberto?
Oops. There you go. Well, thanks a bunch. This morning has been, I believe, quite exciting. Probably you can probably have the same thoughts that I have in the terms of the discussion that has flourished. And for my final intervention, I don't want to try to summarize everything that has been said here. There's a bunch of different ideas that we have heard about, probably that we had pinpointed in our heads, some of the ideas that have been conveyed to us in terms of food waste on different solutions. But my takeaway messages are more general in the sense that I deeply appreciate also the discussions that have been made between different ideas, and I hope that Will and Greg eventually will come by with a beer and try to solve some of these issues. But at some point I heard someone that said that it's okay to disagree. I mean, and when we are having a discussion and everybody agrees, that means that no one is thinking. I mean, if we all agree in the same stuff, that means that someone is either not paying attention, or basically we are not thinking about what is being said. So it's also very helpful to have different perspectives and different ideas. And at the end of the day, I see this nexus like having a blanket, right? When we saw people coming by and start talking and saying, and then the next person came by and said, okay, that's all fine, but if we do that, then this is going to happen. And then eventually another person came and said, okay, that's all fine, but if we do that, then this is going to happen. The blanket is exactly the same size. The resources are finite, the ones that we have. And eventually we need to start thinking more and more in the complexity of the trade-off. And with that, I really would like to wrap it up. I deeply appreciate everybody sticking by. It was very pleasant to see a very large crowd in the morning, and I see with emotion that we have kept a very large audience, so deeply appreciate that. Speakers are going to be here still for some minutes if you want to approach them. I want to deeply appreciate each and every one that took their time, the speakers, to go through the process of thinking and putting together the ideas. Of course, our partners, Fundación FEMSA and the IDB for being partners from the past 10 years and for hopefully the next 10 years. And of course, all the team from Fundación, from the Centro, that were able to organize all this very high level, very interesting event. So with that, once again, my deepest appreciation. Thank you very much, and we'll keep talking, keep the discussion. Thank you.
Agradecemos la presencia de todos. Con esto cerramos el foro. Muchas gracias.
To 24